Good afternoon across the ASEAN region. I'm Emily Wimedemo, Managing Editor of Automotive Logistics, and welcome to our ASEAN-focused live stream. The theme of today's program is about unlocking potential and driving supply chain performance and operational excellence. Over the past 12 months, we've been building a picture of what that actually requires across the ASEAN region through our editorial coverage, our market intelligence, and our conversations with executives on the ground. So to open today's discussion, I want to start with where we were last October when we held our first ASEAN conference in Singapore and launched our ASEAN Automotive Logistics Market Report. The headline across the two was certainly growth. We predicted the region's logistics market was worth just over $10 billion in 2025. Our forecast projected it reaching $11.6 billion this year, rising to nearly $25 billion by 2036 at an 8% compound rate. And production was expected to grow from roughly 4.5 million vehicles to more than 7 million across the same period. And these figures, which you'll see displayed on your screens just now, are based on data from 2024 and 2025, with 2026 estimates, so they do capture the market, slightly before several of the developments we'll be discussing today. But it's worth highlighting, though, that even then, the growth captured here was always uneven. Light vehicle sales across the ASEAN 6 fell over 5% in 2024 to 3.28 million units. And you'll be able to see some of those figures. They are a bit small, but if you zoom in, you'll be able to see some of those figures on the table on the slide just there. Thailand and Indonesia bore the worst of it, with volumes down 25% and 13% retrospectively. Malaysia, Vietnam, and the Philippines were heading the other way, with sales rising on stronger consumer sentiment and new model launches. With that mixed picture, a structural shift was already visible. By mid-2025, EV penetration across the ASEAN 6 had reached 13% of passenger vehicle sales, up from 9% the year before. We saw Chinese brands were localizing manufacturing in Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and Japanese OEMs were consolidating operations in what they saw as more resilient markets, particularly Malaysia and the Philippines. Then in September last year, we sat down with Susanna Lehmann, Managing Director of Volkswagen Group Malaysia. She explained how these pressures were translating into operational challenges. She described Volkswagen as operating under highly localized restrictions with very low volume, which is challenging. She also said the only sustainable solution was to increase volume, and this created what she described as a self-fortifying effect. Higher volumes reduce per unit costs, which improve pricing, which support further demand. And without that scale, real localization was hard to reach. She also made a comparison on logistics costs. Singapore, she said, was 3 to 4 times more expensive than Malaysia for comparable operations. Volkswagen had already moved its Asia Pacific after-sales parts distribution from Singapore to Malaysia for that very reason. So I'd really encourage you to read more from our sit down with Suzanne after this live stream. She definitely goes into much more detail than what I've just depicted here. The link has just been shared with you in the chat. So I do encourage you to bookmark that for later. Then I want to pivot now slightly back to our conference in October. A month later, there was a stance that defined the day. It came from Stellantis that the supply chain within the region should be treated as a growth driver and not a cost center. And here's our Chief Content Officer, Christopher Ludwig, sharing some of the conference insights from the floor of that event.
Welcome to Singapore, the logistics heart of Asia Pacific in so many ways, and here where we're so happy to host the first Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain ASEAN Conference, focused on automotive supply chains here in Southeast Asia, looking at challenges across the region, optimization opportunities, integration, digitalisation, and much more in this important region, which is growing. We see a strong growth forecast, but full of challenges, volatility, whether it's the weather, whether it's different regulations across the region, whether it's fragmentation. But nonetheless, huge opportunities for logistics and supply chain to add value, and we talked about that across the day. We started with a keynote presentation from Ashwani Mupasani, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Stellantis across India and Asia Pacific. And he talked about how supply chain is at the heart of increasing speed for Stellantis, shortening order to delivery times, getting vehicles to customers faster so that it reduces inventory and capital costs and helps the company earn money. He talked about how supply chain needed to be seen as a growth area, not just a cost center. And that means investing in the right solutions and partners to increase that speed, to have alternatives. He shared great examples, for example, of hub and spoke models where vehicles could be centralized and distributed to different countries in this region, or circular supply chains for packaging and much more.
So as you just heard there, that phrase from Stellantis' Ashwani Mupasani really became the through line of the event. We only heard a snippet from Chris there, but he does go on to share how other speakers really built on that same idea. BMW's Dr. Michael Nicolaides described ASEAN as the company's emerging fourth pillar globally and called for greater harmonization of regulations across the region. Suzanne from VW was also with us as a speaker. On stage, she updated the positions she set out in September and offered a specific example of how customs fragmentation works in practice. And we had VinFast Global Component and Supplier Quality Director speaking about the difficulty of building a supplier base in a market where the local capabilities haven't yet caught up with the ambition. But since the conference, I would say, a number of developments have really tested the assumptions in our forecast. Whatever the broad pressures on the market seem to be, investment in electrified manufacturing has continued at scale in Thailand under its EV 3.0 and EV 3.5 incentive schemes. Thailand allowed car makers to really, import EVs at preferential rates and offered government purchase subsidiaries on the condition that they establish local production and compensate for imported vehicles through domestic manufacturing. Thailand's Board of Investment reported this week that 198 EV-related projects have now been approved, worth more than 137 billion baht. That's approximately $4 billion, if I'm working my maths correctly there. And what's notable is that the investment spans across the full EV ecosystem, not just electric vehicles. It includes batteries, vehicles, components, software, and charging infrastructure. So electrified vehicles of all types, including hybrids and plug-in hybrids, as well as battery EVs, accounted for more than 44% of new vehicle registrations in Thailand last year. So as someone outside looking in on the market, it really seems that the strategy within Thailand has moved beyond, battery EV alone towards building a more connected supply chain spanning production, R&D, and testing. But I wouldn't say the investment there has been frictionless. Earlier this year, 10 Thai automotive associations submitted a joint proposal to the government calling for fairer conditions between domestic manufacturers and importers. They argued that incentives should, target activities bringing genuinely new capabilities rather than competing with existing firms. And they flagged the cost disadvantage Thai producers face on strategic inputs where Chinese manufacturers benefit from lower raw material costs. And with the current incentive scheme ending in 2027 next year, the question of what replaces it is becoming even more pressing for the industry. And then I want to pivot a little bit because another major development that we have seen this year has been the crisis in the Middle East. On the 28th of February, coordinated US and Israeli strikes on Iran triggered a crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. And we're really starting to see the cost impact of that following now. Brent crude rose from about $70 a barrel before the conflict to around $107 by early April, feeding directly into higher freight freight and distribution costs across the region. The upstream impacts were, particularly prominent here, with tightening feedstock availability causing plastic prices to jump by about 37%, driving up the cost of composites and rubber used in vehicle components. And the impact of that is, likely most felt by the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers operating in tighter margins. And our reporting identified that Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia are the markets with the greatest exposure. There was also a downside effect. Rising fuel prices appeared to accelerate interest in electric vehicles across the region. A VinFast spokesperson, as reported in our coverage, indicated that the conflict-driven fuel price rise could support the company's profitability targets in 2026. And then the US-Iran deal was announced in mid-June that included reopening the strait, but the situation has deteriorated again this week. Iran has been accused of targeting commercial vessels transitioning in the strait. The US has responded with fresh strikes on Iran military targets, and President Trump said yesterday that he considers the interim agreement to be over, but talks can continue. So for shipping companies, certainty definitely remains elusive here, as Salim Lyon's chief operating officer put in our European conference earlier this year. Even if the war ends tomorrow, there's already so much cargo piling up that this will have an impact on the market. And I can say that assessment probably looks more relevant than when it did when he said it back in March. So, if we really layer those kind of stories together, you have a kind of a view of what the current operating environment is. Thailand is investing billions into electrified manufacturing, as we heard, and the wider EV ecosystems. Vietnam's demand is surging, but we're still looking at, how that is affecting kind of localization within the region, and if this is going to keep up with the pace of growth. The structural challenges that our report really initially identified in October around that cross-border complexity, infrastructure gaps, and regulatory fragmentation, I would say have only been amplified by the events of the past 8 months. So this picture is kind of still emerging. It's still giving way to very much lots of opportunities within the market, but the conditions for capturing that opportunity have tightened. Growth hasn't gone away for the region, but what has changed is who gets to participate and what it takes to compete. So as I said, that's a very, very brief kind of overview of the market right now. And our discussion with our panelists will get deeper into those aspects, I have no doubt. So let me briefly walk you through the rest of today's show. We'll be diving straight into a panel discussion with our speakers, exploring 3 key themes that you see here on your screens. We'll start with localization, what happens to the inbound logistics side of things when tariff policies force car makers to build locally rather than import. We'll also look at fragmentation, how to operate across different regulatory environments, and whether AI and digital visibility are making that any easier. And then we'll wrap up with looking at resilience and looking at what it actually costs to build a shock-proof supply chain in a region where input prices, shipping routes, and the competitive landscape are all moving at scale. And then just a few housekeeping notes is this is very much an interactive session. One of our speakers will be sharing a short demo with you, so do stay tuned for that. And your questions are very much welcome at any point during the session, so I do encourage you to start sending them in, and we'll get through as many as possible during the time we have with our speakers. But I'd like to welcome them to the stage. Joining me are two people who very much run the supply chains across this region day to day. We have Eric van Steen, Vice President of Supply Chain at Bridgestone Asia Pacific. He's responsible for planning, procurement, and logistics across Asia Pacific, India, and China, overseeing 11 factories and more than 100 warehouses and a procurement spend above $2.2 billion. Eric, thank you so much for being here with us. And then we have Tuan, Vice President of Supply Chain Management and Logistics for Asia Pacific at Schaeffler. Tuan is based in Vietnam and has played a pivotal role in the logistics, factory setups, lean manufacturing, and supply chain management for the company. Tuan, welcome, and good to have you in the discussion as well. So I want to get straight into the discussion. You were both with us in our conference last year in Singapore. So I want to just get a sense. I just gave a kind of a timeline there of kind of what the market was looking like and kind of progressed over in the last 8 months since we spoke. But looking back over that same period, I want to get a view of how far your supply chains have evolved in practice, and where have you made progress, and kind of what challenges you're still facing. Eric, let me come to you first.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Anything happened since we last met? Oh, yes, something in the Middle East. It's quite typical indeed for the supply chain and, well, life in general over the last few years, where these sort of big disruption events would come every, 2-3 years. And now you have 2 or 3 per year, right? It makes it a little bit harder, frankly speaking, to make progress on some of the more fundamental aspects. Having said that, in some ways also drives you to accelerate some of the initiatives. So, we're progressing on a number of things. We are still in the process of right-sizing our manufacturing footprint. So we've made some progress in that regard. The tariff impact, which seems like a long time ago, but is obviously still there as a carryover from last year as well, and we'll likely get a new impetus in the next few months now with the Mexico, Canada, and US trade agreement being under review again, which matters to us because we are running a global supply chain in many ways as well, with the Asia part doing a lot of supply to the western part of our business. We're obviously continuing on the digitalization roadmap, so investing in advanced planning solutions. Of course, AI is coming on top of that now, not just this year, right? But it's starting to accelerate. We're taking a much more strategic and I would say profound approach to that, and I'm sure we'll get to talk about that a bit later. But so it's dealing with the sort of disruptions that in whatever shape or form keep coming, and whilst at the same time managing our day-to-day performance levels in terms of filling our factories, getting the goods to the customer through the retail or the OE channels, continue to invest in, I would say, mainly in digitalization, and of course in our people as well, adopting the digitalization and the new technologies that have come to the fore and that we can now start using.
Thanks, Eric. A great comprehensive answer there, and definitely lots to unpack, which we will further into the panel, especially around that kind of digitalization aspect and AI and visibility. Tuan, the same kind of question to you. Kind of how has your supply chain evolved in the last 8 months since we last met?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you, Emily, for a nice introduction. There was one technical problem that I couldn't hear what Eric was saying, but it seems like you hear me clearly. I will try to keep it short. I'm pretty sure Eric covered a lot of topics for Schaeffler, being here in the region in Asia Pacific, of course. from external, you mentioned that the Middle East crisis, of course, has also an impact on us and put quite some tension on our transportation cost, but also then lead time, which then is for us important with 12 manufacturing plants in Asia Pacific. And of course, what did it mean then for us internally? We had to focus then more on transport efficiency, mainly working more where we can further improve on the pre and on carriage. So we took quite some initiatives in this regards to further then reduce the lead time and cost, as we could not basically influence further the main carriage, right? And as mentioned, overall transport efficiency, I think that's what we have been working strongly about. Apart from that, last eight months have been really busy at Schaeffler, also Southeast Asia. We had an transfer of our regional distribution hub from Singapore to Thailand, started somewhere end of last year, still keeping us busy. As of course, it's a major change in our network. And apart from that, as with the merger of Schaeffler and former Vitesco back then, October 2024, we handled a lot of integration topics and mean also that we had to look at our overall warehouses, processes in terms of transportation, all those kind of things to further work on those synergies. I mean, and also consolidation of further locations, warehouses, organizational setup. So yes, externally and internally, it has been quite a busy 8 months.
Thanks, Tuan. Well, we could hear you clearly there on our end, and you kind of echoed kind of what Eric just said there. So all good on our side. Thank you, Tuan. Eric, I'm going to come back to you because your remit, as I kind of said in your introduction, spans both China and ASEAN, but also your supply chains are very much seen as global, as you said. We're hearing more discussion around Chinese manufacturers kind of diversifying their production across Southeast Asia, including countries such as Thailand and Indonesia. So from your perspective, how is that changing the competitive landscape for the industry?
Yeah, this is the big one, I would say. Broader than tariffs, broader than the Middle East crisis and whatever else has come our way, because this is obviously a long-term structural, challenge, but obviously clearly an opportunity as well. The good thing is that we are reasonably well established in the China operations. We have manufacturing there for a number of decades already, which allowed us to build up some good relationship with some of the key players in the industry, which obviously in the last 3-4 years have been really taking off domestically as well as globally. What we try to do is to change our own operating model because, as I said, these EV car manufacturers are domestic, but a lot of their product is for export as well. So we take a more global approach in the way we engage with these customers to match their ambition on one level, but also their global operation model. Right, a company like BYD is manufacturing in Thailand, in Brazil, in Europe. So we're trying to match that by having a local presence, but also a global presence, both from a relationship, from a tire development point of view, R&D, but also from an obviously manufacturing footprint point of view. So concretely also in regards to that manufacturing footprint, we are changing the capabilities that we have in our plants across the region. For example, for EV tires, noise is very important, right? Because you don't really hear the sound that comes of a tire when there's already an engine running, but when there's no sound of an engine, the tire sound becomes quite important. So sponge material is embedded in most of the EV tires. So you need to have the right technical capability to put that into a tire in a safe, high quality and an efficient way. So The development of the tire itself is also a little bit different. So yeah, all of those capabilities we are trying to keep pace with and in advance of what the market is doing to make sure that we can cover these customers in the most efficient and effective way.
Thank you, Eric. Tuan, I want to come to you because Schaeffler recently relocated its regional distribution operations from Singapore to Thailand. So can you walk us through a little bit around behind that kind of thinking and that decision and kind of what you're hoping to achieve there?
Yeah, as we know and heard, ASEAN is quite a fragmented and diverse region, and it accounts well for all the potentials that we also have here, right? And we're going there from best cost country to a bit more high cost countries, more efficient countries when it comes to customs infrastructure like Singapore, Malaysia. And of course, having then there the hub in Singapore, we came to the point where we then said like, okay, looking at this fragmented region and the potentials there. Let's play a little bit around at first and then play in different kind of scenarios, and that's how it all started. So it was a more than 6 months exercise to look then there in terms of cost efficiency. What would it mean and what kind of impact we would have moving that from Singapore to Thailand, but more importantly was, and that's where we spent it most of the times, to really study that in more detail when it comes to our customer, their requirements, and make them a really detailed study about all the inbound flows, on the outbound flows. How do we then serve cross-border from Thailand back to Singapore? How would it look like? Lead time impacts, and had there in close alignment with our business, and then of course also our customers. So that for sure was key and was one of the first exercises. And further walking you through, it's of course an exercise that we do not let alone do by ourselves. So we are then partnering up there with the solutions team from Maersk. They had, of course, all the details when it comes to transportation. We put that together with our business requirement, customer requirements, and in the end, of course, that's a decision on that kind of scale that goes then also to our Asia Pacific board, where we then, in conclusion, then decided to move that up to Thailand. And then, of course, working there with different kind of 3PLs, I took quite a long process also going there through an RFQ, because it's then not only a commercial topic and really a technical topic on that side as well, looking that our future partner has then all the requirements in place when it comes to warehousing standards, but also connectivity. So yeah, quite an exercise, and main driver here, not only cost, but also then customer satisfaction. So that's really quick and a brief about the process and how we went along.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, there's quite, as you alluded to, quite a lot to account for in those kind of differences when it comes to designing that regional distribution network. But I want to stick with you, Tuan, on that kind of note around customs, because even relatively short customs delays can have a significant consequence on your operations. So how do you kind of manage that compliance and cross-border coordination across multiple markets?
Yeah, there for sure. I mentioned it already. Singapore and Malaysia are well developed in this sense. Also, when it comes to the last mile and the customs procedure and digitalization approach. India, Philippines, Vietnam, of course, with a bit of gap on potential, especially on the last mile connectivity and the process around that. It is, of course, an approach and dealing with customs and in such a diverse market that I, not let alone, can control from centrally. So it's a mixed approach versus central and decentral. So we have in each of the countries then our expertise, our partners also. It's also not something that we do ourselves. We need their strong partners also in the country itself. You are really familiar with all the procedures that are there in place. So it's a hybrid approach, I would call it, right? As maturity levels also vary a lot from country to country. Mentioned customs, digitalization, and last but not least, and that's what we also did in our exercise when we did that network study. For some countries, we were just aware that on the, let's say that apart from the quantitative aspects in terms of cost, the qualitative aspect in terms of handling and the lead times, we will have an impact. I mean, there's this famous World Bank indicator in terms of logistic country performance, and there you can definitely see that Singapore is on the top, and other countries around Vietnam, Thailand have their challenges. And that's something we catered in our supply chain with basically buffer in our lead times to catch those longer lead times of customs handling, etc.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Eric, you're kind of managing similar complexities in your broad regional network. Can you kind of share a little bit around how you're kind of helping to reduce those same operational risks, and when it's so fragmented across the supply chain?
Yeah, clearly a challenge also in the context of what we discussed earlier. Just to start on the, let's say, the supply side, the raw material side, clearly having a reduced dependency on single suppliers or even single countries or single regions is quite important. It made it a lot more complex, right? Because even having two different suppliers may not be the answer anymore if they're all based in the US, for example. Visibility is quite important, not just in terms of the logistics, if you wish, but understanding your network, where the material is coming from, first tier, second tier, maybe even third tier, but frankly speaking, that's proven to be quite challenging. Of course, the good old method of strategically placing your inventory and having the right amount of inventory in the chain, clearly not the most preferable solution given the impact on cash flow, but definitely one of the tools in the toolkit. Relationship with suppliers, right? I think is quite important. Of course, you need to forecast well, ideally further in advance. Be a reliable partner as well, right? So don't change your orders too quickly, too frequently. Definitely don't cancel because that has very negative impacts on the downstream or rather upstream supply chain. So I would say on the supply side, reduce dependencies, better visibility, and of course, better flexibility will then lower your supply risk. From a manufacturing point of view, it's more complicated than one might think, but we're trying to multi-source within the region, so we can produce the same tire in Thailand as well as in Indonesia. The challenge with that is that the development process actually takes quite a long time. You can't just transplant one to the other, given the difference sometimes in machinery, the difference in the materials that you're sourcing, the difference in the manufacturing process, but even things like the difference in temperature and climate. All of those things impact how we make a tire and ultimately the quality and the performance. So to transfer a tire design from one factory to another takes time, takes energy, takes some funding, but it's definitely one of the things that we're doing. And then even further downstream, make sure that we have the right inventory in the right places. Again, that visibility of the downstream value chain from retail through maybe wholesaler, through our own warehouses, knowing what stock is, where the stock is, and how to access that is another key risk mitigation activity.
Perfect. Thank you. Tuan, Eric was kind of saying there around some of his kind of strategies for enable the importance of enabling visibility, and I know visibility is a major focus or for you, improving that visibility across your supply chain to enable that faster response time. I know you have a demo to kind of show us around this very soon, but before then, maybe you could answer, where have you made the biggest improvements in kind of your end-to-end visibility so far, and kind of what impact that has had on your day-to-day operations?
Yeah, just also adding up what Eric said, right? Of course, methods and tools in our set, of course, for sure. Also safety stock, dual sourcing, scenario plannings, but then also visibility tools there. And our major improvements, I mentioned it earlier, for sure, was looking more deep into also our transportation and there on our pre-carriage. For us, there's a lot of material that we get also out of Europe into the region. And there we looked also on our internal Schaeffler plant suppliers, right? And our other suppliers that we have in Europe, and there already started us getting more transparency on synchronizing, for example, also the different kind of pickup times, that we have less waiting time than in the port where all the things get collected, consolidated, and then shipped into Asia. So there we gained a lot of more visibility. And of course, then along the value chain, also then with our suppliers, getting there also more information in their production planning schedules to also further synchronize and improve there on the inbound side. But yes, at some point, you reach certain kind of limits when it comes then to visibility, especially when it comes then to the main carriage, the things are on the sea. And as earlier mentioned, we focused then really on getting more efficiency, not only in transportation itself, but also how we process all those kind of informations. And you mentioned that short demo. Let me give you a bit of introduction. So not so long ago, roughly 8 months, we started a pilot with our Vietnam team. Why Vietnam? As they handle a lot of documentation. We have their manufacturing plant, 25,000 square meter, around 700 people. They're handling a lot of inbound. That means in the inbound side, they receive around about 2,000 emails per week, 2,025 documents per week. And where are the documents coming from? From all the different kind of suppliers, LSPs. And for the inbound processes, of course, they all need those kind of documents, from material list, landing, all those different kind of invoices. And of course, they all have, for sure, with our 150 plus different suppliers, all different kind of templates, forms. Some send it as JPEG from China. We get it via WeChat or things like that, right? And so it put a lot of stress on operation. And we said, like, okay, let's put into our normal mail communication that we have with our suppliers, our LSPs, and then also our brokers. Between that email communication, it's put one AI tool that is reading that, checking that, labeling that, and then, and that's the magic, then organizing that in one single view, just with an input of an email, taking out the attachment, clustering it, labeling that. And that was a little bit, the vision that we had, and I'm proud that we have also up and running pilot now. And maybe, let's start a quick video, and I will do a bit of voiceover. So as mentioned, once again, the magic of that AI tool is collecting all the informations, and there you see already the shipment view. It's a really fast view, where you have a planning board, a live view of all the different kind of shipments. You can directly open it up. You end up in a shipment, and here you find all the sorted, the communication, the documents, the different kind of milestones. And also, and that was real quick, a bit of an, feel free to restart the video, just add up. So once again, AI tool is reading, checking, labeling, organizing that, putting it all in the tool, having then the planning board. And each of those shipments is not only on the planning board, it's also in a live map. You can open up the shipment, you see there all the details, find the documents in there that are already sorted to the shipment, the milestones, and the tool, and that's the latest innovation, is also giving indications about what to further improve in your supply chain. So once again, the real magic happens really putting this in such an organized view, taking it up all on just only the email information. So there's no EDI to LSPs or suppliers, etc. necessary. All it needs is an email inbox that the AI tool is reading out. And I have to say, that is our latest and greatest.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that demo. I want to shift to Eric, because I want to hear a little bit more about how you're also using AI or kind of automation within your supply chain, if anything similar to Tuan.
Thank you. So we've used AI in some simplistic forms for a few years in some ways, as we used it to scan some of our invoices and documents and used to automatically upload that in certain systems, do price checking and provide some information that helps with visibility. But that's obviously sort of old AI technology. We have started with a number of use cases. To be frank, I think we're a little bit of a slower adopter at the moment, partly because we still have some fundamentals to implement, and we're really focused on that at the moment, making sure that the data infrastructure is the right one, that you're working from platforms and not just on Excel. So there's a lot of structural investment going in, and taking a very sort of considered approach in terms of where do we deploy in a way that it's not just a gimmick and a quick win for some personal productivity, but actually generate structural improvements over the longer term and is scalable as well. So it will take us a little bit of time through the course of this year to build those fundamentals up. But we are, of course, exploring and working with various solutions for example, in our call centers. In Thailand, we have implemented a project in combination with bots, right? We are using with a number of use cases with the order management platform that we have here in the regional office as well, particularly with agentic AI to take the right actions that we know need to be taken, but currently do with human beings, and automate those. They're quite repetitive and should be straightforward. So those are some of the initiatives that we're doing whilst we're building some of the more fundamentals around the infrastructure. If I just could, for 30 seconds, touch on automation, I think that's a key play for us as well. We've just set up and launched, let's call it an ASRS. It's a little bit more simplified, but an automated storage and retrieval system in our factory in Wuxi in China. So it's a combination with AGVs. So we have the storage capability, and then through AGVs, it goes into the warehousing and then ultimately into the container. That part is still manual, and in fact, I just came back from China 2 weeks ago, where we visited a number of suppliers that are heavily invested in the automation in the logistics space, and we probably in the next few months will partner up with one or two of them to develop new technology for us, particularly around the lifting of stillages, which is where still a lot of our storage or the method in which we store goods. And then lastly, we are actively deploying AGVs in our warehouse, particularly in Australia, which, as you can imagine, is a relatively high-cost country, both from a labor as well as from a land cost point of view within this region. So the business case is a bit more straightforward, but I can really see in the next few years, and we're also working with our global supply chain partners and colleagues on that, we will really start to ramp up automation in the logistics space.
Perfect. Thank you for that detailed overview of how you're kind of using AI and automation within your supply chains. I want to pivot a little bit as we end kind of the live stream in about 5 minutes or so. So for any audience, please do send in your questions. And there's so much here that we could continue talking about with Eric and Tuan. So if we don't get to them, we will follow up with you on those. But touching a little bit now on resilience, Tuan, I want to kind of get an understanding of, as organizations are kind of continuing to invest into supply chain resilience, cost still remains kind of like under pressure there. How are kind of you balancing, how are you approaching that balance in terms of like that long-term resilience and the day-to-day efficiency?
Yeah, as of now, long-term resilience, what does it mean? Doing something permanent. And of course, it's then there putting higher transit times in our system, safety stock, working on dual sourcing. Those are for sure long-term activities to work out suppliers, diversify your supply chain. I mentioned earlier also scenario planning. Of course, those are kind of things that are running more long-term, setting up long-term resilience. But overall, I think when it comes then, of course, all those initiatives and let alone safety buffer, safety stocks, of course, a cost topic, right? And therefore, in midterm, short term, we're also working more on being more flexible on that side, right? Meaning staying on track of any kind of disruption topics to react then faster, and to create then resilience measured on the permanent side, but also more on the flexible side, right? And so that's how we are acting on. And I introduced earlier that visibility tool that we're having. It's also something that we did not do alone. We partnered it up with a German startup called Holocene. Of course, that helped us to move a little bit faster on that end, right? I understand the headache that Eric also having in the big corporations for those kind of tools, right? But they also, I think, there are partners like startups like Holocene who are willing to go there a step faster to reach then this kind of flexibility and visibility on short term.
Perfect, thank you. Eric, same kind of question to you on how you're kind of approaching that balance between that long-term resilience and day-to-day efficiency.
Yeah, it's a matter, I think, of sort of carefully picking your focus areas, right? Being strategic about it, and a question of the sort of the long haul, right? So you build these things, resilience, not in one day, 1 week, or 1 year. You do that over time. If I look at our own organization, kind of driven to some degree by the nature of the business, with how car manufacturing sort of evolved over the years, but also by the nature of the product, meaning the big black donut has a lot of space, air in the middle, so shipping is not that efficient in its own right. So we have a lot of local manufacturing and quite a few plants across the world. Of course, there's consolidation of some degree, right? Not every market has its own plant, nowhere near that. But we do have a reasonable spread of the manufacturing footprint. Now that, particularly in the last few years, has given us quite a bit of resilience or flexibility, or both, in fact, to be able to service market. So we continue to look very careful at the footprint, and yeah, to repeat the same mantra, right? It's how do we focus on the digitalization of some of our operations? Frankly speaking, we still have some gaps, capability gaps to close there, but I'm hopeful with the investments plans that we're now building for the next 5 years. We can do that. So it's being in tune with the market developments of the here and now, but also projecting what comes out in the future, looking in the glass bowl, and then place your bets carefully, and then make the consistent investments that are needed to build those capabilities and to enable that resilience.
Perfect, thank you. I want to jump to a couple of questions coming in from the audience here. Tuan, I want to direct this one to you around have you had to adapt any of your kind of logistics routes, modes and processes in the context of fuel rationing or higher costs?
I mean, for us, for sure, and like for every other one, Cape of Good Hopes as a rerouting became the new default, right? And the rerouting of vessels became more or less the new normal. Yes, of course, we also have our sustainability agenda, and of course, in transportation, you can do there a lot. But in the end, of course, there we have our reliable partners who would try to then as most efficient transport our materials from A to Z, right? And here and there, of course, there were some compensation of, and that's also what we got the feedback to save on some fuel, extend a bit of lead times, which is okay. And that's where I'm talking about. It needs a closer collaboration and also with your partners, right, to agree on that in the sense. But then for your urgent shipments to be aware that they are then fully planned out with a certain kind of buffer.
Thank you. Eric, you're welcome to touch on the same question around kind of adapting your logistics routes, etc. But I also want to get your view, because we have a few questions coming in, on how do you see Chinese competition and growth impacting kind of your supply chain? Are you also sourcing and transporting more from China as well?
So on the logistics side, obviously with the recent fuel price hike and also some of the limitations on the container shipping around the Middle East and the raw material supply, we had to make a few adjustments. In some cases, we were able to find a secondary supplier or shift to an existing secondary supplier. Again, these things are not very straightforward because we're very, very specific and very careful about the materials that we buy. We typically test those for a number of months in actual manufacturing process before we adopt a new source, a new material. But some of those activities have been taking place. Obviously, rerouting of container ships. We obviously, sorry, I use the word obviously a lot, but the carriers that we work with are clearly a key partnership, form a key partnership in this. So the relationships that we have with them, the collaboration has been quite important as well. Now, just remind me of the second part of your question.
Around the Chinese competition and
The
growth
Chinese competition.
impacting your supply chains, yeah.
Yeah, so the growth is partly coming in China itself, right? Because we bid on OE contracts for the tires that we supply. So we aim and have been quite successful in securing those OEM contracts. And as I said earlier, is to follow where those exports, those car exports are going into the global market space, and then make sure that we have the replacement tires available in that marketplace as well. Again, at a competitive price point and at the right sort of quality. So in many ways, the Chinese car manufacturers, but also the Chinese tire suppliers are both an opportunity and a formidable competitor, if I may say, that we're trying to work with on the customer side and obviously counter and up our own game as well in terms of how do we do our sourcing, which was also packaged into your question. So yes, we are looking at China, and we always have been using China as a source base. But there are a few initiatives on the way to look at that a little bit more carefully. And yes, more broadly, looking at our supply base and where we source materials from to make sure that we stay very competitive in the marketplace without obviously sacrificing the quality and the performance of the ultimate product, the tires itself.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric. I want to ask you a question now a little around from our audience around kind of the technology side. We had a digital strategies event in Nashville last month that kind of touched on this as well. So this is kind of a global issue around one of our audience members has said everyone talks about AI and automation as a great tool, but in their experience, the real cost sits in the expectations, mismatched delivery quantities, wrong documents, manual rekeying between the warehouse systems and the ERP. So have you been able to kind of identify what the kind of expectation handling costs is for the business, and where you kind of where you hope the most expectations kind of originate from? Tuan, maybe I'll come to you first on that.
Yeah, I think we heard it a lot from Eric and my end when it comes to collaboration, but collaboration means also you have multiple partners. Yeah, I mentioned earlier all those logistic partners, but also suppliers. And yes, working with a lot of partners like this in logistic, that means also here and there a lot of manual entries, mistakes, etc. And that's also what we identified of one big issue then, and also potentials where we then, as earlier mentioned, implemented that AI tool. And talking about digitalization, AI for logistic, I think it's really around visibility, but not just a shared visibility in any kind of report that's then historically reflecting. We're talking here about really real time, meaning also then finding those issues in this documentation, which could potentially cause a delay of the shipments or customs handling, meaning really not just reported visibility, but really real-time visibility. And that's, I think, a strong focus going in, which also takes quite some effort, for sure.
Yeah, perfect. Eric, same question to you on that as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think on the subject of AI, there's still some work to be done as an organization here in APIC around, seeing the value and the opportunity that this provides us, but also recognize the prerequisites in order to scale that and use it in the right way. The costs that come with it. I think everybody's aware of some of the stories out there about companies that end up spending more on AI than they're actually saving in the headcount reductions or otherwise expectations that they had set up front. So in sort of good old-fashioned Bridgestone style, I would say we're taking a very considered, measured approach in that regard. But you could see that sometimes there's a bit of a gap between what certain people in the organization think about the size of the opportunity and what it takes to really make that happen. So good communication, being open-minded, looking at the facts, do proper proof of concepts, trials at the right scale is part of our approach to make sure that we do things in sort of with the right pace and ensure the right outcome, so that we then close or don't create that expectation management gap and the associated cost that you were referring to. So not a very concrete answer, but maybe a little bit more philosophical one, or management style one. But that's how we're looking at things within Bridgestone at the moment.
Perfect, thank you. Well, the supply chain can be very philosophical and theoretical as well. So to kind of end, I want to wrap up and ask, when we welcome you back to our event in October in Malaysia this year, where do you hope the market would have progressed from where you're kind of seeing now? Tuan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, first of all, on external side, let's hope that the situation in Middle East improves, even though with the latest news it doesn't look so good, but hopefully that happens overall geopolitically. Nevertheless, of course, I think we at Schaeffler and overall regarding also our partners, I think, we now got used to the new normal. Apart from that, of course, from our internal initiatives, I mentioned at the moment is just in pilot. I hope that the solution from Holocene when it comes to the inbound digitalization is something that we can further roll out by then in more countries. And apart from that, looking forward, of course, to October and then to catch up with you all in person.
Thank you, Tuan. Eric, to wrap us up.
Yeah, look, of course, we would like to see the business to grow, both on the OEM side as well as on the replacement market. As I alluded to at the opening, we still have the USMCA agreement in North America. but President Trump has said that he doesn't want to continue that. Obviously, we have to see how this all plays out, but that could be another certain type of disruption coming in. Global trade has been thriving on a degree of stability and certain formal and informal agreements over the decades. So we thrived as a business on the back of that, but we will adapt to the situations that come our way. In the meantime, we'll just continue to focus on what our customers are looking for, right? In terms of the price quality balance, create value for our customers over and beyond the product itself. Those are the standard but very fundamental things that we continue to try to do as a business, and obviously in the supply chain as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Eric. Tuan, it was great to have you. I mean, we could talk so much more about everything going on in the industry right now, but I very much look forward to welcoming you in person to our ASEAN conference in Malaysia, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there in person. Thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring us a little bit full circle here, because, what this hour has really kind of shown us is that the conditions for reaching kind of any opportunities within the industry has really tightened considerably. As our panelists alluded there, localization requirements are biting, the competitive landscape is shifting, input costs and shipping routes are under pressure from events well beyond anyone's control. I think the difference between the companies that capture this growth and those that don't will really come down to execution in the supply chain and how well they localize, how effectively they integrate across a fragmented region, and in the transparency and trust they build with their partners across every tier, which both of our panelists spoke about in quite a bit of depth there. We'll take these conversations further in person in Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain ASEAN in Kuala Lumpur on the 27th and 28th of October. Registration for that event is open. And the ASEAN Automotive Logistics Market Report that I kind of showcased at the beginning is available on our website to download. Our updated report will be coming in October, and it will be accessible in the same link when it goes live. So if you're waiting for next year's report, do keep that link bookmarked. It should be with you soon. And then, of course, more live streams to come this year around packaging and our annual end of year live stream looking at 2026 in review. So we'll have a lot to say based off of that discussion, and we're only looking at the ASEAN region here. So we will be looking globally, and then, of course, the trends leading into 2027 as well. And registration for these live streams are open. So many thanks again to Eric from Bridgestone and Tuan from Schaeffler for joining us. Some great insights there, and I can't wait to go into more depth with you on site in Malaysia. And thank you to all of you as well for watching live or either on demand, and for being with us and for all the engagement with your questions. It's great to see that. And I also look forward to welcoming you, all of our viewers in Kuala Lumpur as well. Thank you so much.